welcome. Today we're going to learn how to make this lovely chipboard covered album with 3 separate pages. You can use this album for memorabilia. It's a great gift album, and you can also put your precious photographs in here. Stay tuned. The first thing you're going to need today is you're going to start with 2 8.5 by 11 sheets of cardstock. I'm using black. You can use any color that you want. This is going to be the cover for your album. You're going to turn your pages landscape style. I have 1/2-inch miracle tape here. It is double-sided tape. And you're going to take a strip of this and you're going to put it along the edge of one of the 8.5 by 11s. Now, I'm just turning it this way to help me work. I'm going to line it up to the top as close as I can. Don't worry about the excess. We're going to take a scissors and I'm going to cut off the excess because I need it to have flush with the end. So I'm just going to snip it off and then snip it off. We're doing this because most of you may not have 16-inch long paper. And so this is a way to create a cover. You can use 12 by 12 paper as well. And you're going to peel this off. And we're going to create a larger sheet for you to cover your album with. Now notice, I'm not going all the way over. I'm just kind of going over to the width of that tape. And I am taping that on top. Push it down. Looks pretty good. This is going to function as the cover of your album. The next step that you're going to need is 3 separate pieces of chipboard. We have a front and back cover here and the spine in the middle. The left and right cover are 7 inches wide by 7.5 inches tall, and the spine is 3 inches wide by 7.5 inches tall. You can make this album any size you want. This is a great size to use if you're working strictly with 8.5 by 11 because you're limited by the size of the paper. So this is a great format for using up all that cardstock that you have in your stash. The next step that you need to do is you need to put adhesive on the front and back of each pieces of chipboard. I'm going to cover each one of these, front and back, with the chipboard, and then we're going to take it to the next step, which is creating the base of the album. The next thing I wanted to show you is that I took all 3 pieces of chipboard and I covered all 3 pieces front and back in double-sided adhesive. I've seen some videos where they put the adhesive around the perimeter and then they can use some kind of a liquid glue. You have that option to use that. Just make sure that the glue that you're going to use does not wrinkle your paper. I use several sizes of this. This is stuff that I carry. It's called miracle tape. I used a 2-inch size, which is great because it just covers larger areas. But I also have a 1-inch tape, which is this one. This one's a 1/2 inch, and then this one is a 3/8 inch. You can also use thinner tape. I also carry a 1/4 inch and an 1/8 of an inch, depending on the size of the album. But the 2-inch tape just helps you get the job done a lot quicker. The thing I want to point out is when you put the adhesive down, make sure that your adhesive is directly up to the ends of each piece of chipboard. You're going to need that to secure the paper to the chipboard. Grab the cover that you previously made and put it in front of you. Now here's the tricky part. You need to measure down 1/2 inch from the top. Now you can eyeball this, but you really want to make sure that you're coming down a 1/2 inch. You need to create a lip that you can fold over onto the chipboard. So you can take a ruler and measure down a 1/2 inch and give yourself some tick marks. So I'm going to start in the center. Here's my 1/2 inch mark. I'm using a colored pencil because I'm using black paper. Feel free to use a regular pencil. Even a white pen will work. It doesn't matter where you put the tick marks. You're not going to see any of this. All of this is going to get buried. when you put the album together. So if you make a mistake, just redo it. Once I have a sufficient amount of marks made, I'm just doing this to create a guideline so when I lay my chipboard down on top of the paper, I can stay straight. So I'm just going to draw a line just like that. And that's just a guideline. So when I lay this stuff down, it can kind of be straight. And notice that I want equidistance from the top at the bottom. So draw your tick line and then get ready to peel all of the adhesive off. The next step is you would need to adhere your chipboard to your paper. Now I have removed all of the adhesive from the front side of my chipboard. Always start with your spine. You have a seam right here in your paper. This is where you've actually created that. I'm drawing a line there just to give you guys a visual aid. My chipboard is 3 inches. I'm gonna eyeball this. I know the center of this is 1.5. I'm gonna try and line up the halfway mark of my chipboard to the center of this seam. Now the other thing I wanna make sure is you drew that tick mark as a way to help you line this up so it's as straight as you can get it. You want to try and line that up. I'm going to push it down. Once you push this down, it's not movable. So there goes my first piece. I'm going to do the same thing with the cover in the front. Now, this is one little tip that will help you. Grab 2 scraps of chipboard. You want to put them together. You can glue them together or just hold them together. The thing you need to be careful of is you cannot put the cover directly against the spine. The book needs to be able to shut. So you have to leave a little bit of space between the spine and the covers. So the chipboard, the scrap chipboard is a way to kind of give you a spacing. And I'm using 2 pieces of chipboard together. I'm gonna line it up just so I can see like how far apart. I'm gonna flip this over so the adhesive is side down. I'm gonna push this against it. I'm gonna look at my top line. See if I'm pretty good. I probably need to stand up. I need to basically look over top of it and hopefully my head's not in your way. I'm gonna push it over, line it up, looks good, and down. So that's looking pretty good. Then I'm gonna do the same thing with the other side. I'm gonna put my spacer in. I'm gonna flip this over. There's the top of my line. Again, I'm just using that line that we drew as a guideline to help line this up. Take your time when you're doing this because you kind of want your album to be straight. I'm gonna put it down and stick into place. And then you can see that I have lined this up. I think I'm a little off over here. Looks like I'm a little off, but I'll probably be able to hide that when I put the album together. That is how you line it up. Most importantly, you can see that I have a space between these 2 pieces here. And that's what you need to make sure you have enough space between the spines and the covers so that the book is going to close. The next step, once you put your covers down on your paper, is we need to trim this part and this part. It's too much of an overlap. So you can take your ruler and you can measure out 1/2 inch from the side. You can go a little more. I tend to go a little bigger than 1/2 inch. And you can just draw a line and then cut this excess off. So you at least want to have a 1/2 inch border at the very end. I use my paper cutter here. I'm just going to insert this in. And I know this mark here on my cutter is 1/2 inch, so I will line up the edge of my chipboard with my cutting path and then come back a 1/2 inch over here. If I come back, this is my 1/2 inch mark. So I know from here to the cutting mark is a 1/2 inch, but I'm probably gonna back it up a little bit. Maybe I'll do 5/8 inch, put it down and cut, and then that gives me the border that I need. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flip it over and do the same exact thing again. Again, I'm lining up the edge here with my 1/2 inch mark here. I'm going to back it up a little bit because I want a little extra space. I'm going to cut it, and then it cuts off the excess. So this is what your album should look like once you've cut off the excess. Now, before we start attaching, bringing the lips over to wrap the album, the one thing that I like to do is I like to take this and I like to press it down like this. And what it does, it creates a crease in the paper. It gives it a little bit of a bend. And so when I go to wrap the album, I have a little bit of help from that bend. I'm going to do it on all sides. So I'm going to do the long sides and I'm going to do the short sides as well, just to create that little bit of a crease to help me and assist me when I want to go stick it down. Now, one of the things I highly recommend this, otherwise you're going to have pretty pointed corners. Take your ruler. You want to use 1/8 of an inch measurement. From the corner of your album, you're going to measure out 1/8 of an inch and put a dot there. And you want to do this on all 4 corners. Once you've made that measurement, take your ruler and lay it across. You want to create a 45-degree angle and mark that. We're going to cut all of these corners off, but do yourself a favor and measure out 1/8 of an inch. You'll get a much better cut. I've done this freestyle and I always mess it up. So I've decided that since this is a big part of the project, I just measure out, I kind of look, and then I make a cut line. And I'm going to make all of these lines, I'm going to come back around and I'm going to snip all of them off. I've cut 3 out of the 4 corners off. I just wanted to show you how I do this. I've drawn my cut line. I take my scissors and I cut along that. Now the reason we do this is when you're folding the corners and you wind up with a lot of bulk on the end. And so what happens is you fold this part in and then this part comes on top and you get a really clean 90-degree angle. So that's the whole point of doing that. It's definitely worth the effort to do it, just so you have clean corners on the end. The next step is you need to remove all of your adhesive. So take every piece of adhesive off your covers and also off of your spine. And once you do that, you're going to be ready to lay down the permanent cover on the inside as well. So I'm just peeling. I'm going to turn off the camera and then I'll be back in a second. All of my adhesive has been removed. Now I'm going to start sticking. I always start on my longest edge, which is this edge. You always start in the middle and work your way out. So I come in where the seam is and I bend it. Take your time on it. It's going to be a little taut when you're pressing down. If you have a bone folder, feel free to use that. I usually stick it down, then I'll go over it with a bone folder, and I'll come through here and I'm sticking and sticking. Don't worry about this edge. You're going to cover all of this up. That's the good news. So if you get a little bit of buckling there, and then you can, of course, come through, press that down if you want. You're going to flip it over, and you're going to do the other side. Remember, you're always working from the center out. You're going to press it down, press it down, press it down. Okay. And then if you want, you can go over the edges with a bone folder just to kind of smooth it out and, you know, make sure that that's properly adhered to the chipboard. Do the same thing for the other side if you wish. You can always do this at the very end too if you want to just have clean edges. Now, this is not a necessary step, but it is certainly a step that I recommend. When you fold this flap over, a lot of times you're going to wind up with a really hard point on the end here. And this is where I think this is kind of a necessary step to have clean edges. I'm going to bring this closer to the camera so that you can see this. I will take my bone folder. You can see how this looks right here. I usually take my bone folder and kind of bend that in, just so that when I make that final fold over, I have a really clean edge. So I'm gonna do the same thing over here. I'm gonna make sure I'm in the camera here. Take this and just kind of bend it in so I have a clean 90-degree angle. Then I'm gonna take this flap and I'm gonna fold this over. Make sure you're tucking this in. And then I'm gonna fold it over and seal it. Now again, remember, you're gonna be covering the inside of this, so if it's not a perfect thing, you're gonna put another piece of paper on top so you're not gonna see it. I'm gonna do the same thing for this one and this one. I'm gonna take my bone folder and kind of tuck that in a little bit. You can also use a stylus for this if you don't have a bone folder. I'm gonna tuck it in just to kind of mellow that point out a little bit. And then I'm gonna take this, fold it over, use the bone folder, kind of smash things down. And with that, you have covered your album. That is the outside of your album. The next step is we need to make the cover that goes on the inside of the album. We have to make the inside cover of the album. Again, I took two 8.5 by 11 sheets. My album is 7 inches tall. So again, I'm gonna turn my sheets like this. Now, before I actually tape them together, it's 8.5 by 11. I know that my album is 7.5 inches, and I need enough coverage on the inside, but I don't want 7.5. So I actually cut my 8.5 by 11 paper down to like a 7 3/8. So you can see the difference between an 8.5, 7 3/8 inches. You'll see why in a sec. So I've done that, and when I did that, then I also put adhesive onto one of the edges, just like I did for the front cover. Again, I'm going to peel off my double-sided adhesive. I'm gonna take my other sheet and I'm gonna line it up. You don't have to come in all the way. It's at least a 1/2 inch overlap. That's the width of my tape. Let me see if I can get this better. It's easier if you stand up when you do this, but that looks pretty good. And you're gonna make that. Now this, just to kind of eyeball it, you could see it's enough where it's gonna cover the inside. Now I have to determine the length. Remember, with your seam, you always want your seam to be in the middle because you're gonna be covering that up. So you always try to place your seam in the middle. So how do you figure how long you need to have your paper? If I kind of eyeball the seam, I know from kind of the middle of my spine to the edge over here is approximately 8.5 inches. So I need 8.5 inches from the seam to the end. So what I'll do is I'll take my paper and I'll get my paper cutter. I open the cutter up and I take where the seam is. Here's my seam. I know you can't see it, but I'm gonna show you with my finger. That's my seam right here. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna line that up right at the 8.5 by 8.5 mark, and then I'm gonna cut. And then I'm gonna do the same exact thing on the other side. I'm gonna take my seam and line it up at 8.5 approximately. You can always trim it if it's too long. I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna cut that. So if I did my measuring correctly, then this piece of paper should be the completely right size. And you can kind of see, even if I lay it before I adhere it down, that's gonna give me the coverage that I need, because I'm gonna cover all of this as well. Now, one of the things that I would recommend that you do, there is adhesive there, but I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna lay adhesive all around the perimeter of this piece of paper so that I know all of the edges are going to be stuck down.